Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Bennett, and today I want to tell you about something that is sitting on a pharmacy shelf right now for less than 50 cents a day. Something that has been used medicinally for centuries. Something that the research shows activates one of the same biological pathways that Ozempic activates. Something that improves blood sugar control, reduces appetite, lowers insulin resistance, and produces meaningful weight loss in clinical studies. And something that almost nobody is talking about in the context of metabolic health because it does not have a pharmaceutical company spending billions of dollars to market it. It does not have celebrity endorsements. It does not come in a weekly injection pen. It comes in a jar, and it looks completely unremarkable. It is called Psyllium husk. Now, before you close this lecture because you think I am about to talk to you about a constipation remedy, I want you to stay with me a little, because what I am about to explain in today's lecture about Psyllium husk has almost nothing to do with constipation. It has everything to do with blood sugar regulation, appetite hormones, insulin sensitivity, gut barrier function, and the specific GLP-1 pathway that made Ozempic one of the most prescribed and most talked about medications in the world. The mechanism is real. The research is solid, and the cost difference between this and a monthly Ozempic prescription is not small. It is the difference between 50 cents a day and over $1,000 a month. That alone deserves your attention for the next few minutes in today's lecture. But here is what I really want you to understand before we go into the science. The reason Psyllium husk works as powerfully as it does for metabolic health is not because it is a clever supplement. It is because it is replacing something that human metabolism was designed to receive every single day and that the modern diet has almost completely eliminated: fiber. Not the vague concept of fiber that you associate with bran muffins and laxatives. The specific type of soluble viscous fiber that your digestive system, your blood sugar regulation, your appetite hormones, and your gut microbiome all evolved to interact with at every meal for the entirety of human evolutionary history, and that virtually nobody in the modern world is actually consuming in meaningful amounts anymore. Let me give you a number that should genuinely alarm you. The recommended daily fiber intake for adults is 25 to 38 grams per day. The average adult in a developed country consumes somewhere between 10 and 15 grams. We are consuming less than half the fiber our biology requires. And this is not a minor nutritional gap. This is a fundamental mismatch between what our metabolic systems evolved to receive and what we are actually giving them. And the consequences of that mismatch show up in the exact conditions that are now epidemic: insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, obesity, fatty liver disease, cardiovascular disease, chronic inflammation. These are not diseases of too much fat or too many calories alone. They are in significant part diseases of fiber deficiency. And Psyllium husk is the most direct, most affordable, and most evidence-backed way to address that deficiency specifically. So please watch this lecture till the very end, because the practical protocol I am going to give you at the end of today's lecture is what separates Psyllium husk producing dramatic metabolic results from Psyllium husk producing nothing but a slightly more comfortable bathroom experience. Timing, dosage, hydration, and sequencing all matter here, and I'm going to give you exactly the framework you need to use this correctly. And if you are new to my channel, believe me, first listen to this lecture, and I bet you will definitely subscribe to me before leaving today. Also, if someone in your life is either on Ozempic, considering Ozempic, or simply struggling with blood sugar, appetite control, or stubborn weight, please share this with them when you finish watching. Now let us understand what Psyllium husk actually is, because most people have a vague and incomplete picture of it. Psyllium husk comes from the seeds of a plant called Plantago ovata. It has been used in traditional medicine across multiple cultures for thousands of years. But what makes it physiologically remarkable is not its history. It is its specific fiber composition. Psyllium is approximately 70% soluble fiber, and not just any soluble fiber. It is a highly viscous, gel-forming soluble fiber. When Psyllium husk contacts water, it absorbs it rapidly and transforms into a thick, dense, mucilaginous gel. And that gel is the entire mechanism. Everything Psyllium does metabolically flows from that single physical property, the gel. To understand why the gel is so powerful, you need to understand the single biggest problem with the modern diet from a blood sugar and insulin perspective. And that problem is speed. The modern diet delivers glucose into the bloodstream too fast. Refined carbohydrates, processed foods, sugary drinks, and even many apparently healthy foods are digested and absorbed so rapidly that blood sugar spikes sharply within minutes of eating. The pancreas responds with a large insulin surge. That insulin surge drives glucose into cells rapidly, often overshoots, and leaves blood sugar dropping again within an hour or two. That drop drives hunger, cravings, fatigue, and the next round of eating. This blood sugar roller coaster is not a character flaw. It is a physiological consequence of eating a diet that contains almost no viscous soluble fiber to slow the process down. Now think of psyllium husk gel as a speed bump for sugar. Actually think of it as a series of speed bumps placed throughout the entire digestive tract. When psyllium gel is present in the stomach and small intestine, it physically surrounds food particles and slows their digestion and absorption. Carbohydrates that would normally be broken down and absorbed within 30 to 45 minutes now take 2 to 3 hours to fully enter the bloodstream. The glucose curve that was previously a sharp spike becomes a long, gentle slope. Blood sugar rises slowly, moderately, predictably. The pancreas responds with a modest measured insulin release rather than a dramatic surge. Insulin sensitivity is preserved rather than chronically stressed. And the reactive drop that drives hunger and cravings simply does not happen because there was no spike to drop from. This is not a theoretical mechanism. It is one of the most consistently demonstrated effects in nutritional research. Studies show that psyllium husk, consumed before or with carbohydrate-containing meals, reduces post-meal blood sugar spikes by 20 to 30% in healthy individuals, and by even more in people with insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes. These are not marginal effects. These are clinically meaningful reductions in the glucose and insulin burden on the body at every single meal. Now here is where psyllium husk starts diverging from what most people expect from a fiber supplement, because the gel does not just slow glucose absorption, it does something that most people have never heard of in the context of fiber. It triggers GLP-1 release. Glucagon-like peptide 1, the same hormone pathway that Ozempic and other GLP-1 receptor agonist medications work through. GLP-1 is produced by specialized cells in the lining of the small intestine and colon called L cells. These cells release GLP-1 in response to specific signals from the gut environment. One of the strongest natural triggers of GLP-1 release is the presence of viscous soluble fiber in the intestinal lumen. When psyllium gel moves through the small intestine, it directly stimulates L-cell GLP-1 secretion in a way that most other fiber types do not, because of its unique viscosity and its ability to physically interact with the intestinal wall over a prolonged transit time. What does GLP-1 do when it is released? It slows gastric emptying further, extending the speed bump effect beyond even what the gel alone produces. It signals the pancreas to release insulin in a glucose-dependent manner, meaning only when blood sugar is actually elevated, which is a far more precise and less damaging insulin pattern than the chronic insulin surges of a high-refined carbohydrate diet. It signals the brain directly through the vagus nerve to reduce appetite and increase satiety, and it reduces glucagon, the hormone that tells the liver to release glucose into the bloodstream. The cumulative metabolic effect of natural GLP-1 stimulation through psyllium is smaller in magnitude than the pharmacological GLP-1 stimulation of Ozempic. I want to be honest about that, but it operates through the same pathway. It produces the same direction of metabolic change, and it does so without the nausea, the muscle loss concern, the cost, or the dependency that pharmaceutical GLP-1 agonists carry. Now, I want to contrast psyllium with other fiber supplements, because not all fiber produces these effects, and some popular fiber supplements actually cause more problems than they solve. Inulin, Chicory root fiber and fructooligosaccharides are fermentable fibers that feed gut bacteria aggressively and rapidly. In many people, particularly those with sensitive digestive systems or existing gut dysbiosis, these fibers produce significant bloating, gas, cramping, and digestive discomfort that leads people to abandon fiber supplementation entirely and conclude that fiber does not agree with them. Psyllium is fundamentally different. It is not rapidly fermented in the colon. It moves through the digestive system slowly, forming its gel, doing its metabolic work, and reaching the colon in a form that is fermented gently and gradually rather than explosively. The result is that psyllium is extraordinarily well tolerated compared to inulin and fermentable fiber supplements. The bloating and gas that people associate with fiber supplements is largely an inulin problem, not a psyllium problem. And this distinction matters enormously for compliance because a supplement that causes significant digestive discomfort will not be used consistently. And consistency is everything with psyllium. If you are still here with me, go ahead and comment below the word "Yes, Doctor," and I will know how many of you have joined today's lecture and are also attending with full attention. Also, if you're new to my channel, consider subscribing and give me a quick thumbs up on this lecture. Now let us talk about insulin resistance specifically because this is where psyllium husk's metabolic effects compound into something genuinely significant over time. And this is the connection that most people, even those who already use psyllium for digestive reasons, have never made. Because when most people think about improving insulin resistance, they think about medication, about extreme dietary restriction, about intense exercise protocols. They do not think about a fiber supplement. And yet the research on psyllium and insulin sensitivity is some of the most consistently positive evidence in the entire nutritional science literature on fiber. Insulin resistance develops when cells that should respond to insulin signals stop responding efficiently. The pancreas compensates by producing more insulin. More insulin keeps blood sugar controlled in the short term, but creates a chronically elevated insulin environment that locks fat in storage, drives inflammation, accelerates visceral fat accumulation, and progressively worsens the very insulin resistance it is trying to compensate for. Breaking this cycle requires reducing the insulin burden on the system consistently and over time. And this is precisely what psyllium does at every meal when used correctly. Every time psyllium blunts a post-meal glucose spike, it reduces the insulin demand at that meal. Every reduced insulin demand gives insulin receptors a partial rest from chronic overstimulation. Over days and weeks of consistent use, this cumulative reduction in insulin demand begins restoring receptor sensitivity. Cells that were previously resistant to insulin signals begin responding more efficiently because the chronic overstimulation that was wearing them down has been consistently reduced. Studies of psyllium supplementation in people with type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome have shown meaningful improvements in fasting insulin, fasting glucose, and HbA1c over 8 to 12 weeks of consistent use. These are not dramatic pharmaceutical level improvements, but they are real, measurable, directionally correct improvements produced by a dietary intervention that costs 50 cents a day and has an excellent safety profile. The gut microbiome effects of psyllium also contribute to insulin sensitivity improvement through a mechanism that deserves specific mention. When psyllium reaches the colon, it is gently fermented by beneficial bacteria, producing short-chain fatty acids, particularly butyrate, propionate, and acetate. Butyrate is the primary fuel source for colonocytes, the cells lining the colon. It maintains the integrity of the gut barrier, strengthening the tight junctions between gut cells that prevent bacterial endotoxins from leaking into the bloodstream. And endotoxin leakage is one of the most underappreciated drivers of systemic insulin resistance and inflammation in people eating modern diets. When the gut barrier is intact and endotoxin leakage is reduced, systemic inflammation decreases. When systemic inflammation decreases, insulin sensitivity improves throughout the body. Psyllium is therefore improving insulin sensitivity both directly through blunting post-meal glucose and indirectly through supporting the gut barrier that prevents the endotoxin-driven inflammation that drives insulin resistance from the gut outward. Now let us address appetite and cravings, because this is the Ozempic comparison that resonates most powerfully with people who have experienced what GLP-1 activation actually feels like. One of the most frequently described experiences of people on GLP-1 medications is a profound quieting of what researchers now call food noise. The constant background preoccupation with food, with the next meal, with cravings, with hunger that never feels completely satisfied. GLP-1 activation quiets that noise by acting directly on appetite centers in the hypothalamus and by slowing gastric emptying to the point where fullness is sustained for hours rather than minutes. Psyllium produces a version of this effect through two simultaneous mechanisms. The physical mechanism of gel volume in the stomach, which activates stretch receptors that signal fullness to the brain, and the hormonal mechanism of GLP-1 release from intestinal L cells that signals satiety centrally. People who use Psyllium correctly and consistently report that hunger between meals decreases meaningfully, that the urgency of appetite that drives snacking and overeating loses its edge, that cravings for sweet and refined foods reduce over days and weeks of consistent use, not to the dramatic degree that pharmaceutical GLP-1 agonists produce, but genuinely and meaningfully in a way that makes reduced caloric intake feel less like discipline and more like a natural consequence of a changed appetite landscape. This is the mechanism through which Psyllium supports weight loss without requiring calorie counting or extreme dietary restriction. It does not force weight loss by making you miserable. It creates a hormonal and physical environment in which eating less feels natural because hunger and cravings have genuinely decreased. That is a fundamentally different and more sustainable approach to weight management than fighting constant hunger with willpower. Now let us get into the practical protocol, because this is what determines whether Psyllium husk changes your metabolic health or simply adds bulk to your morning routine without producing meaningful results. And I want to be very specific here because the details of timing, dose, hydration, and progression are not minor variables. They are the difference between Psyllium working powerfully and Psyllium doing almost nothing beyond making you feel slightly fuller. Starting dose matters enormously. Most people who have bad experiences with Psyllium or who see no meaningful benefits start with too much too quickly. Begin with 1 teaspoon, approximately 5 grams, once daily. Not a tablespoon. Not the full serving size on the label. 1 teaspoon. For the first 5 to 7 days, this is your only dose. Allow your digestive system to adapt to the increased fiber intake before progressing. After 5 to 7 days of comfortable tolerance, increase to 1 teaspoon twice daily. After another 5 to 7 days, if tolerance remains comfortable, increase to 1 tablespoon, approximately 7 to 8 grams, once or twice daily. The maintenance dose that produces the most significant metabolic effects in research is between 10 and 15 grams per day, which is 1 tablespoon taken once or twice daily. Progressing gradually to this dose over 2 to 3 weeks produces excellent tolerability in the vast majority of people. Now, timing is the variable that most people get completely wrong, and getting timing right is what separates Psyllium producing meaningful blood sugar and appetite effects from Psyllium producing nothing but added bulk. Psyllium must be consumed before meals, not with meals in the middle of eating, not after meals when digestion is already underway. Before meals, specifically 20 to 30 minutes before your largest carbohydrate-containing meal of the day. This timing allows the Psyllium gel to form in the stomach before food arrives. When food then enters the gel-filled stomach, it is immediately surrounded by viscous fiber that slows its digestion and absorption from the very first moment. The speed bump is already in place before the traffic arrives. If you take Psyllium after the meal, the traffic has already passed. The gel forms around digested rather than undigested food, and the blood sugar blunting effect is dramatically reduced. For people targeting blood sugar specifically, I recommend taking Psyllium before both the largest meal and any other meal that contains significant carbohydrates. For people primarily targeting appetite control and GLP-1 stimulation, taking Psyllium 20 to 30 minutes before the first meal of the eating window produces the most sustained appetite suppression throughout the day. Tell me in the comments for what reasons you'll be using it, and whether you're finding this lecture helpful so far. Also, if you're enjoying the lecture, you can hype it on YouTube so others can also watch this valuable lecture and benefit from it. Now, hydration is non-negotiable here, and I want to be very direct about this because it is a genuine safety consideration, not simply a comfort recommendation. Psyllium absorbs water aggressively. When mixed with insufficient water, it can form a very thick mass that moves slowly through the esophagus and intestinal tract. In rare cases, inadequate hydration with psyllium has caused esophageal obstruction, a serious medical complication. This is entirely preventable. Every dose of psyllium must be mixed in a full glass of water, a minimum of 250 milliliters, stirred immediately, and consumed quickly before the gel thickens too much to drink comfortably. Follow immediately with a second full glass of plain water. Do not take psyllium and then walk away and forget to drink the follow-up water. The follow-up water is as important as the mixing water, and throughout the day when using psyllium regularly, total water intake should increase by at least 500 milliliters above your normal baseline to compensate for the water psyllium absorbs in the gut. Fasting compatibility is something many people ask about, and the answer requires the same nuance I apply to any substance consumed during a fasting window. Psyllium husk in plain water contains minimal calories, approximately 5 to 10 calories per serving from the small amount of soluble fiber. Its effect on insulin is essentially negligible. It does not meaningfully raise blood sugar. For the purposes of fat burning and insulin lowering during a fasting window, psyllium in plain water is compatible. It does not break the metabolic fast in any meaningful hormonal sense. For the purposes of strict autophagy-focused fasting, some practitioners prefer to avoid it entirely during the fasting window and reserve it for the period immediately before the first meal of the eating window. Both approaches are physiologically defensible depending on your primary fasting goal. What psyllium taken during the fasting window does do is extend appetite suppression into the fasting period, which many people find makes the fasting window significantly easier to maintain without hunger becoming uncomfortable. For people who are new to fasting and struggling with hunger during the fasting window, a teaspoon of psyllium in a large glass of water during the morning fasting hours can make the difference between successfully extending the fast and breaking it prematurely from hunger. Now let me address who should be cautious with psyllium because I always give you the complete picture. People with difficulty swallowing or esophageal narrowing should not use psyllium without medical guidance because of the obstruction risk with inadequate hydration. People with inflammatory bowel disease in an active flare should discuss psyllium with their gastroenterologist before beginning. People on medications, including diabetes medications, thyroid medications, and certain cardiovascular drugs, should take psyllium at least 2 hours away from their medications because psyllium's gel can reduce the absorption of medications taken at the same time. This is a genuine drug interaction consideration that is frequently overlooked. If you take any regular medication, time your psyllium doses at least 2 hours before or after your medications without exception. People with known bowel obstruction or severe constipation without adequate hydration should not begin psyllium without medical supervision. And anyone who experiences significant bloating, cramping, or digestive distress that persists beyond the first week of gradual introduction should reduce the dose and progress more slowly or discuss with their physician. Now, if you have watched my full lecture, I must sincerely say that you genuinely care about value. Because choosing to understand the biology behind a 50-cent intervention rather than assuming that effective solutions must be expensive is exactly the kind of informed thinking that produces real lasting metabolic change. Please go ahead right now in the comment section and tell me what was the one best thing you learned today and whether you have ever used psyllium husk and what your experience was. I genuinely want to hear from you. And if you found today's lecture even a little valuable, you can subscribe to my channel, hit that like button, and share this with someone you care about right now. And please do not wait. Send it via WhatsApp, email, or a text. Someone in your life is either spending a fortune on GLP-1 medications or struggling with blood sugar and appetite without knowing this option exists. Give them this information today. Thanks for joining me in today's session. This was Dr. Bennett, and I will see you in the next video pretty soon.